I think we're ready. So this course, Potawatomi Peril to 1838, is based on some work that John Hassett and I, Jim Paul, did over the last few years. And it's in memory to John and a tribute to him. He died on August the 27th. He was born and raised in the area right next to the Kankakee River State Park. And all through his life, he was involved in learning about the Potawatomi. Here you see he and I in 2013, we had just, we were involved in a festival. It was during the Bourbonnais Friendship Festival on a Sunday in late June. He is looking debonair in his derby hat, and I had just portrayed George Letourneau on the porch of the Letourneau Home Museum. So John and I had prepared this. He, in 2019, just a year ago, had presented Potawatomi Flashback, Lifelong Learner's View. I was going to piggyback on that with Noel LeVasseur's relationship with the Potawatomi. And there, hence, is this program. Let's see, I'm trying to get that off the screen. Okay, I guess. Do you see this little thing at the top?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to get it off. Well, maybe it won't go off.
Excuse me, on mine, there was a little minus symbol in the far upper left-hand corner. I clicked on that and it went away.
Upper left-hand corner.
Of that little box of our pictures up in the top of that and to the left.
Oh, right there. Oh, that took you all away though. Oh, well, we might just have to deal with that. Any suggestions, Deb, on that?
I'm not sure.
Let me click. Oh, well. Looks like it's going to be with us. So anyway, we titled the course Local History 101, Making Life-Changing Decisions in the Kankakee River Valley. And we wanted the course to be a little different than a regular course, face-to-face, where there's two different levels between teacher and student, presenter and audience, and narrator and listeners. We wanted the individuals to come together on the same plane. And so the purpose of this webinar about the Potawatomi up to the year 1838 is to put you in their moccasins so that you can make some decisions as they had to make some decisions. And this is a course that will be episode 1. In the future, I plan to put together an episode 2 entitled Antebellum Abolitionist, 1838 to 1860, which will go over the French Canadians' attitude towards abolition and the Quaker family that moved here, Thomas and Margaret Durham, in 1835, and they were definitely abolitionists. So some of the gut-wrenching decisions they had to go through. And then I thought there would be episode 3 in the future, George Letourneau's legacy from mayor of Bourbonnais and then Kankakee to Illinois state senator, 1860 to 1906. So those are the plans, and to engage you in a new way in the program and in learning. And we're going to make this available to the community. That's why we're recording it. We're going to hopefully put it on the Bourbonnais Grove Historical website, and it will be available for educational purposes for the the community, elementary, high school, college, university, community groups, and so on. Now, pretend you are a Potawatomi and you need to write down an answer to one of these, to this question. There are 5 possible answers, and you need to pick a Potawatomi name for yourself. So why don't you pick a Potawatomi name for yourself, write it down. It's in the 1830s now. You're living in the Kankakee River Valley. This is your home, has been for many generations. How would you react to the Indian Removal Acts of the 1830s? Congress passed the Indian Removal Act of 1830 and President Andrew Jackson signed it into law. Here's one option. Answer number one. Would you comply, move west of the Mississippi River onto land set aside beyond the current reach of white settlers? Land for you, the Potawatomi. 2, would you move west, but periodically travel many miles back to your family hunting and fishing grounds in Illinois? Now remember, this is the time before railroads. Travel is done by wagon, horseback, walking. Option 3, would you resist and fight the white settlers initially, but if necessary, move west and periodically return to Illinois with limited or no rights, property, and prospects? Two more options. Would you assimilate with the white settlers through intermarrying and learning their culture? And the last option, would you resist and possibly die in violent clashes with the white settlers? All right. You need to make a decision, 1 through 5. 1, 2, 3, 4 are 5. You need to pick a name for yourself. All ready? Next slide. Now you need to pick a number from 1 to 10. You have your number in mind? Now the number you picked will represent a person below that will walk with you on this journey that we're going on. The first part of the journey will be John's narration of the Potawatomi history with my input here and there. And the second part will be listening to Noel LeVasseur talk about his life. Now you've got the number in mind. All right, the number that you picked represents this person. If you picked 1, you picked who we most commonly call by the name of Shabona, who is really Chabonais. Pick 2, you are now having this lady walk with you, Wachiki. If you pick 3, you have Main Poke or Main Poche, which means crippled hand, walk with you. 4, Miss Akekwa is walking with you. She is a very interesting person. 5, Billy Caldwell, or his Potawatomi name, Shaganash. Alexander Robinson is number 6. Chippenapeque. 7 is Katish. She's the wife of Francois Bourbonnais Sr. Number 8 is Meshikatino, the chief, who had a large village that encompassed just about all of Bourbonnais today. 9, Chief Taman. He was the uncle of Wachiki and Nesakekwa. He had his Potawatomi village was down near what is now the town of Iroquois, Illinois, along the Iroquois River. And then finally, Chief Shawanasi, whose Rock Village and Little Rock Village settlements were up in what we now know today as the Kankakee River Park and Shawanashi Camp area. All right, you have a person walking with you. Tearaki, the wonderful land. Tegaraki was once covered by warm and shallow water with hard ridges breaking the surface. You see some of those hard surfaces there, what we know as the Indian caves. There were many fish and other water creatures. Rocks of these creatures can be found in this creek that flows into the Tegaraki River. An ocean of ice once covered and flattened much of Tegaraki. One end of the ice ocean broke, causing waters to make the river and creeks of Tegaraki. These waters also made for large openness, some marsh and some prairie. Large creatures lived in this ocean of ice time. People came to Tegaraki while hunting these large animals. As the ice ocean slowly melted, the air became warmer and drier. Large openness spread across the land. Big animals hunted by the people were no more. And then they hunted and fished and picked fruits and nuts and berries and seeds of wild grasses. They stayed for long times on high land and then followed herds of bison, caribou, and deer. This is an interpretive Potawatomi narrative written by me in an article, The Story of Twin Oaks Prequel, The Herald, July 2017. You can see when the waters broke from the glacier, how they gushed through the canyons and made these rock formations that we now know as the Indian caves, and rushed into this area and opened up the Kankakee River and then the Illinois River. This is an illustration of Thomas and Margaret Durham, who arrived in this area in 1835 and were welcomed by the Potawatomi. That was their encounter period, the late 1820s and the 1830s. And then they had to make a decision, how are we going to accommodate these people? But they were friendly to Thomas and Margaret Durham, and they built a wigwam made out of boughs for them to live in until they had their log cabin built. Here you see the mastodons that were in this area. No dinosaurs, sorry. You're not going to find any dinosaurs in this area, but mastodon bones are frequently found. So where did they come from, the Potawatomi and others? You see on this map that John put together, Gitchigumi, which means high water, where the Ottawas and the Chippewas, the Ojibwas and the Chippewas were, what we now know as Lake Superior. You can also see some of the other tribes. And I put question mark by the Iroquois because, you know, the Iroquois are over here under Lake Ontario for sure. Were they actually living in the area south of the Iroquois River, in the Kankakee Marsh area where Chief Tammans Potawatomi later lived? There's a tradition in this area that a band of Iroquois were living here and were attacked by a war party of Illini, the Illinois, the Illinois. This is the only county in the United States named Iroquois County, by the way. So anyway, we'll say that they were there from that tradition. I don't know if I can move this over here a little bit. Oh, I can. That's good. So the Potawatomi, the Ottawa, and the Ojibwa, the Chippewa, were in the Council of the Three Fires. And they were driven into this old Northwest area. Now, we don't often think of us as the Northwest. We're the Midwesterners, aren't we? Well, in the days back at the time we're studying, this was the old Northwest. North from the colonies along the eastern seaboard, and west. So this made up the old Northwest. So you can see the Iroquois were moving tribes to the west. So the Potawatomi were known then as the keepers of the fire. So Lake Gitchigumi was made famous by Gordon Lightfoot. And I'm sure you all remember the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchigumi. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about Father Marquette, and he was in this area with Louis Joliet in the 1670s. And they left St. Ignace at one point up here along Lake Michigan, and they traveled down this way along the streams by canoe, always by canoe. And they came to an area where the Iowa River intersects with the Mississippi. And on his way, he lived until, well, they eventually went down the Mississippi and proved that the Mississippi enters the Gulf of Mexico. They didn't go all the way because of the Spanish down there, but they did prove that. Then they came back, and eventually in 1675, Father Marquette was in this area, and then he went on the Illinois, and then he found, they went on to the Kankakee, and they portaged over to the St. Joe River near South Bend today, and they went up the St. Joe River to Lake Michigan. Then they went up north a little further, and he died in May of 1675. Here's Father Marquette. So in that traveling to the area where the Iowa River has a confluence with the Mississippi, Father Marquette and Louis Joliet were invited to a great feast by the Illinois, the Illini, the Illinois. They were known by different names, but anyway, Father Marquette said that the feast, consisting of 4 dishes which had to be partaken of in accordance with all. The first course was a great wooden platter full of sagamite, that is to say, meal of Indian corn boiled in water and seasoned with fat. The master of ceremonies filled a spoon with sagamite 3 or 4 times and put it in my mouth, as if I was a little child. He did the same to Monsieur Joliet. As a second course, he caused a second platter to be brought on which there were 3 fish. He took some of the pieces of them, removed the bones thereupon, and after blowing on them to cool them, he put them in our mouths as one would give food to a bird. For the third course, they brought a large dog that had just been killed, and when they learned we did not eat its meat, they removed it from us. Finally, the fourth course was a piece of wild bison, the fattest morsels of which were placed in our mouths. Father Jacques Marquette. So the story goes that on the traveling, the canoeing of the Kankakee River, Father Marquette and his band camped around Aroma Park and where Cougar's Grove was eventually a place of socialization. And there was a huge oak tree that grew for centuries. And it finally fell down in 1920. And it was known as the Marquette Oak because it was supposedly on the location of that encampment of Father Marquette and his band on their way to Lake Michigan, where they were going to portage to the St. Joe River and then go to Lake Michigan. Here's a sketch by a wonderful local historian, Vic Johnson. It shows a person right here that's very famous. So it was in December, just a few years after Father Marquette and Louis Joliet were in the area, that René Robert Chevalier Sur de la Salle's group of explorers paddled down the Kankakee River. Now, he landed near what is today the Perry Farm Park. Cavalier Park in Bourbonnais may be the site. So it's interesting. Cavalier Park, René Robert Cavalier, Sur de la Salle. It all comes together, doesn't it? Now, he named the river the Sangolais in honor of the colonial minister in France. The name was later changed to Teatiki. But of course, the Potawatomi referred to the whole land as Tearake, wonderful land. And so the word Kiankiki evolved. Some Indian tribes called the land Teoke, which means wolf, or the Coeur d'Ivoire, runners of the woods from the French, used the name Kinkike. So you see the origin of Kankakee, the word. At one time, we were all French in this area. This was part of New France. And here you see the flag of King Louis XIV and 15th and 16th. And this is the flag of New France. And so from 1534 to 1763, when the French lost all this area to the British in the French and Indian War, or the Great War for Empire, this was all New France. This was the area with their flags here. You see the British flag over here along the eastern seaboard with the 13 colonies. Eventually it was called Louisiana, this area under King Louis XIV, and the Illinois country. I drew in the state of Illinois so you'd see where we fit. And so the big year of change is 1763. Now this map shows the different Indian groups, but what's most important here is the Potawatomi. All around from Detroit, all around Lake Michigan, through northern Indiana, St. Joe, where South Bend is today in that area, all of our area, all of the Chicago area, and going all the way up to Green Bay. So they first settled in this area, Green Bay. They began to migrate south. Lower Michigan, St. Joe River, then they went this way. So they would be in developing their villages in the Milwaukee, around Chicago, and of course the Teakiki. What were they like? In John's narrative, he gave us this information. Women, emphasis on women. The men weren't involved in the farming. They raised corn, pumpkins, beans, peas, squash, melons, and tobacco. They gathered nuts, roots, acorns, berries, and wild rice. The men did the hunting and fishing and the raiding. And so there was also the hunting and trapping of elk, deer, bear, bison, beaver, muskrats, raccoons, mink, martens. The pelts were very, very important. And they moved around, and they always moved around. And maybe, I suppose, when John wrote the word important here, he intended for us to consider the fact that they were used to moving around on foot, pulling things by sleds behind the ponies, and maybe if they had wagons that way. But they would move. They were accustomed to that. Now, some of you have talked about the trading post Ile à la Cache, the island of the cache, where they would supply and have different items for trade, ergo cache. Now, at the Ile à la Cache, it's right here along the Des Plaines River before it has its confluence with the Kankakee and forms the Illinois River. This is the Fox River over here. So that's where the Ile à la Cache is. If you want to go there and visit, it's a very significant place, and they have a lot of reenactments. Here you see John at one of the rectangular wigwams there at Ile à la Cache, and then you see another photograph of a smaller wigwam. So in the summer, they would have these large 1 or 2 family wigwams with the arched roofs. And then in the winter, they would go into the smaller ones to preserve the heat. And here's a graphic that shows the structure of the wigwams. And this graphic is from Ile à la Cache. And this wigwam is actually at the visitor center at Ile à la Cache. Here you can see the different types of dwellings that the different Indian groups used. So here's the Potawatomi. Very similar in many respects. A Potawatomi encampment. So most of their clothing was made of deer skin, and they also used bison and bear skin robes until they began to trade with the French and the British for textiles. Women usually had long hair in a single braid, while men had long hair except when on the warpath. When warriors shaved their heads except for a scalp lock, which was adorned with an eagle feather and a roach made of deer or porcupine fur. Warriors usually wore red and black paint as well. Here you see a reenactor with the war paint on. Again, graphics from the Ile à la Cache. What were the going rates for goods? What would it take? 1 pelt, you would be able to choose from these different items. Okay, earrings, needles, musket balls, a silver cross. 2 pelts, oh, a little bit more, cotton shirt, an axe, 2 yards of cloth. 3 pelts. Oh, that's a little bit better, isn't it? A blanket, a kettle, some rum, armband, some beads. Oh, look at the conversion. 1 beaver pelt equals 10 muskrat pelts, or 2 deer pelts, or 2 skunk pelts. 2 beaver pelts, a little bit more. 1 otter pelt, 1 bear pelt. Oh my. So you can see that the pelts were not the same in value, were they? So the French began robust trade with the Native Americans in New France. And they were traveling around a lot, therefore the word voyageurs. Okay, so the voyageurs were looking for pelts for the European clothing market, and the Indians, of course, needed the clothing, pots, and other metal objects, such as guns and powder. This is a blow-up of the area. Here you see the Teakiki. And by the way, the Teakiki is spelled with a K and a T. I've seen it spelled 2 different ways. Here you see the Kankakee going on towards Indiana, and then going up to the St. Joe River, and then going to Lake Michigan. This is the Iroquois River. And you can see the word pay means land. So the land of the Illinois Indians, the land of the Miami Indians, the Mascoutins, and so on. Now the fur trade changed the world, and John took this slide at the Ile à la Cache also. And the fur trade had an end to it, though. It began to decline in the early 1800s. and that would cause a great deal of change around the world. It had an impact on the Native Americans, the voyageurs, and of course everything else. And so it was a changing world. We think our world is changing in the year 2020. Think about the 1830s as a changing world also, especially as the fur trade declined. Okay. The Fox tribe was in central and central eastern Illinois. And they were troublesome for the Potawatomi and other tribes. And the Potawatomi had allied with the French during this early time of the early period of the 1700s. And the Potawatomi, along with the French, began to attack the Fox. The Fort St. Joseph was built, and that was along the St. Joe River. The Fox surrounded the Illini at Starved Rock and surrendered 800 women and children. And finally, the French troops came from Fort Chartres in the southern part of Illinois, and with their Potawatomi, Kickapoo, Mascoutin, Illini, Sacs, and Miami allies, they slaughtered the Fox warriors. And at a major battle in what is today McLean County, about 90 miles away from here, the Fox had gone into a fort. This is newspaper articles about this massacre. They had gone into a fort. This is the Fort de Fox, or the Reynards in French, from the French to the English. And they were under siege for 3 weeks. Well, they couldn't survive, so they left at night, but the children crying gave them away. And so the French and their allies were able to defeat them. And that was a big crisis in Illinois at that time. Again, another map of the Indian tribes around the area. The most notable is the Potawatomi in our area. And you can see where the other tribes live. Again, the Potawatomi there. So the Potawatomi came into our area towards the mid part of the 1700s. So the British were also moving into the Old Northwest. And what's interesting is that when I become Noel LeVasseur, he'll tell you at one point he worked for the British fur company, the Northwest Fur Company. And they were up in northern Minnesota today. And then he eventually went to work for the American Fur Company. So there's competition in the Old Northwest by the 1740s between the British and the French for furs. So in the 1750s, the Potawatomi and the French were again allied against the British. What's interesting is that later on, the Potawatomi would ally with the British during the War of 1812, but so are the waves of war. And some of the warriors brought smallpox back to their villages, and in that Great War for Empire, the French and Indian War from the 1750s to 1763, the French lost all of Canada, except a few fishing rights off the coast. They lost all of these areas. By 1763, the British were in control of Canada and the 13 colonies. So they moved into southern Illinois. It's not called a state yet. It's not even a territory yet, but it's the Illinois country. Pontiac led a rebellion in the 1760s, but was defeated. So in the late 1700s, the Potawatomi continued to attack settlers along the Ohio River. And the settlers continued moving west into the old Northwest. In 1774, the Northwest was really becoming part of the new country about to be born after the revolution with Great Britain. So the Americans are moving west, and George Rogers Clark assisted in protecting them. So did Major General Anthony Wayne, given the nickname Mad because of some of his actions. And this was all with the support of the British against the Native Americans. Fort Wayne, named after Anthony Wayne. The Maumee River, from Ohio, through Ohio to Indiana. Prophetstown, where Tecumseh and his brother the Prophet led a rebellion in 1812. The Tippecanoe Creek, there's the Kankakee River. Main Polk's Village is here. Fort Dearborn right there. Another map showing the area. Kankakee, Prophetstown, the Maumee River. Vincennes to the south. Kaskaskia, Cahokia. This is a sketch of Fort Dearborn, built right there. So there was a treaty signed in 1795, and after the defeat of the Native Americans, the floodgates were opened, and this is a sketch of the treaty, and here's the colored painting. I guess I should say painting. And this is William Wells. He's an interpreter. This is William Henry Harrison, Anthony Wayne. And so this one Indian chief is giving a long deliberation, but apparently to not much avail. So Maine Polk was going to lead the resistance. And Fort Dearborn was a reaction to that warlike activity and built in 1803. Here you see some of the Potawatomi villages in the area. There's Coatiche, Little Rock, Michigatano, Fort Dearborn. And this is the site of the first house in Chicago, built in 1778 by Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable. And what's interesting is du Sable was married to a Potawatomi by the name of Kittiwaha. So Maine Polk continued his attack. He's on the offensive in 1805, the early 1800s, a time of a lot of warlike activity. The fur trade is declining, hunting is less productive. Some of the Potawatomi tried farming, but it just wasn't in their culture. Was it something that only the women should do? The men had a hard time with it. What are we going to do was their question. How are we going to handle this encroachment from the white settlers? Is there any way that we can survive this? So President Jefferson began the treaty process, and Indians would trade their lands for money and trade goods. 1806. A lot of problems with the annuity payments, the land sales, corruption, whiskey trade. Many of the Potawatomi and other tribes began to follow Tenskwata. And he was known as the Shawnee Prophet. He was a brother of Tecumseh. Billy Caldwell, Shawanosh, followed him, as did Shabona, which means burly shoulders. Another wave of resistance. The attacks on the Osages began, and white settlers, 1810, 1811. Maine Polk recruited many other Indian tribes, but William Henry Harrison was going to stop it. And so the War of 1812, Chabonnet is supporting Tecumseh at the Battle of Prophetstown, the Battle of Tippecanoe. This is a grandiose illustration of a battle that probably never took place like that, because the warriors, along with Tecumseh, were away from their Tippecanoe camp at Prophetstown in 1812 when Harrison attacked. Captain Held conducted a council with the Potawatomi, and they were quite worried about Fort Dearborn, that it wasn't going to stand up to an attack. And so they began to prepare to leave. They disposed of their weapons and whiskey, threw it down a well, August 14th, 1812. And they were attacked by Potawatomi and Kickapoo and Sacs and Winnebagos. And so they left. They were on the move, and they were being attacked along the banks of the coast of Lake Michigan, the shore of Lake Michigan. 53 were killed or wounded. "15 Potawatomi were killed." Now, Captain Nathan Held, here in the sketch above, and his wife were later taken to the British by Mackinac by Alexander Robinson. And the second in command was ransomed at Lake Peoria. The Kinsey family were taken to Detroit, and they were saved by Black Partridge and Wabansie. Captain William Wells, though, his heart was cooked and eaten. The site of Fort Dearborn in Chicago. This is the marker. These are some of the versions of the attack on Fort Dearborn. Again, there may be a little artistic license in these. So after the War of 1812, the attacks continued. Well, I guess this is still during the War of 1812. And Tecumseh went up to the Thames River in Canada, in Ontario. The British were able to have a victory, but Tecumseh was killed, and Billy Caldwell and Shabona returned to Illinois, and then they were defeated, and the peace was signed that ended the War of 1812 and 1815. Well, of course, the floodgates were open again. And the Potawatomi began to cede their lands beginning in 1816. Again, they were promised cash annuities, and it would last for many years. And some of the individuals that were in command of the villages, in charge of the villages, were giving a little bit more. The mixed bloods are what the French referred to as métis, associated with the tribes, and were rewarded. So some of them were Billy Caldwell, Alexander Robinson, and Katish's offspring. These are some of the flags that flew over the old Northwest. in the area of the Kankakee River Valley. The flag of New France until 1763. Great Britain controlled all this area as an Indian reserve. And also it was a part of the province of Quebec under the British control. In 1778, after we were free of Great Britain, we were part of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia's borders extended to the Mississippi River. And then we have the United States flags, the 13-star flag and a 24-star flag with several flags, the number of stars between these years. Now, the Illinois Territory during this time period looked like what is today part of Minnesota, with all of Wisconsin and Illinois. And the Potawatomi and the other Native Americans that were in the Illinois Territory at this time knew that their fate was quite troublesome, especially when certain proclamations were taking forth. Since the Potawatomi had participated in the attack and burning of Fort Dearborn, they had gained the reputation of known troublemakers by the Illinois territorial governing officials. And in 1814, the territorial governing makers obligated themselves to pay $50, that is equivalent to $800 today, $50, $800 for the death of an Indian who entered a settlement with hostile intent. Civilians who had official permission to send an expedition into Indian country could qualify for a $100, or in today's terms, $1,600, reward for killing an Indian warrior. With this reputation and reward system, one can understand how the Potawatomi of the Kankakee would be apprehensive about impending Illinois statehood. That narrative was written by me in April 1818 in my article in the Herald, Potawatomi Apprehensive about Illinois impending statehood. When Illinois became a state on December 3rd, 1818, you can see the population centers were down here in the south. In the north, this was all still Indian lands. 1818, our part of the state, pretty well vacant of white settlers, but that would change. Here you can see sections I, J, and K that were given up by the Potawatomi by the Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe in 1832. That was just around the same time as the Black Hawk War. And it was at that point the Potawatomi removals began. After the Black Hawk War ended, the Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe changed the Potawatomi lives. The treaty was between the white settlers and the chiefs and headmen of the Potawatomi tribes of Indians of the Prairie and the Kankakee. The treaty gave land to those Potawatomi so that they could sell it. One land is now being sold to the white settlers. Our land is now being sold to the white settlers since we must move west of the Mississippi. In return for this land, the Potawatomi were given new lands, money, and supplies to help build their new homes. The Potawatomi worried that this money and supplies would be little or late in arrival, and that they would suffer after removal to the lands toward the setting sun. The Potawatomi bands began to leave their homes and villages. Their hearts were broken. The squaws cried. The braves and old women shed tears as they saw for the last time their Teyarake, its beauty, its trees along the river, its openness full of game, fur-bearing animals, deer, and its clear waters full of fish. That was part of my narrative in the Story of Twin Oaks prequel in the Herald, July 2017. So the settlers who were coming in at this time, you know some of their names. Francois Bourbonnais Sr. And he was in this area maybe by 1829, but for sure by 1832. So Francois Bourbonnais Sr. is here in the sketch by Vic Johnson. This was his brother Antoine Bourbonnais. And this is Francois Bourbonnais Sr.'s son, Francois Bourbonnais Jr., his son Washington, his wife Katish, and their daughters and son. So you can see then that the trading with the Potawatomi was still going at this time. John Jacob Astor had developed the American Fur Company that Noel LeVasseur worked for a long time. And they were very active in this area in the 1820s and up to the mid 1830s. Francois Bourbonnais Sr.'s wife, Katish, was Potawatomi, mixed blood. And they lived in a cabin right near today's Dairy Queen. They had their 6 children there, all in the sketch. And then they moved south to an area that Katish received by the Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe, where along the banks of the Kankakee River, where the senior citizens high rise is today. They lived there for a while. And then they moved west of the Mississippi to western Missouri. And it's thought that Francois Bourbonnais Sr. died there in the late 1840s. Chamorgar, our soldiers' village, is another site along the Kankakee River that has a commemorative stone. Here are some of the reservations from the Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe and a sketch by Vic Johnson. So Gurdon Hubbard and Noel LeVasseur and others were coming in. They were traders, fur traders, and now they would become land speculators. And they would find for themselves a new opportunity. So Hubbard and LeVasseur were working for the fur company, John Jacob Astor's fur company, and their trading post was along the river at Buncombe, which I'll show you, or he will show you in a few minutes. Hubbard and LeVasseur both married Potawatomi. It was a custom of the culture, country of custom, and it would give opportunities to both sides. It would benefit both sides. I'm sure LeVasseur will tell you more about that. Wachiki, John remarks, had 2 children by LeVasseur, and he will tell you that there's another person too, another child. LeVasseur was married to her. He was also married to Mississauga. And they left at different times, and there's some more to tell about them, and that's going to come up when Noel LeVasseur is here. Wachiki came back many times from traveling west of the Mississippi. She finally married Francis Bergeron and had 4 children with him. She was, the last time she was here was in this area was in 1863. And Mr. Sid Vale of Moments described her as a comfortable person in the white man's world as she was in her own. In essence, walking in 2 cultures. Additionally, she appeared intelligent, was quick-witted, and was an engaging conversationalist. She had good taste in clothes. So we see her posing here. She was the last Potawatomi to set foot in Iroquois County, and as we mentioned before, the daughter of Shibona. George Godfrey, a renowned author and great-great-grandson of Wachiki and Francis Bergeron, was speaking at the unveiling of the mural in Watseka in October of 2019. There's George, and then there's the mural with his great-great-grandmother. Here we see some of the reservations along the Kankakee River. With the Black Hawk War in 1832, there was another big change. And as a result of the battle, a young soldier was involved by the name of Abraham Lincoln. The local Potawatomi were involved on the one hand, but most of them opposed Black Hawk and did what they could to placate the white settlers and the other Potawatomi into not fighting. And there were 5 reasons for the removal west of the Mississippi of the Potawatomi. The depletion of game. They were not farmers. They just didn't have enough support from the government here. They couldn't vote, had no rights. And their lands were open. They were in the path of white settlement. They were ripe for settlement. So the resistance, which continued with Pontiac, Tecumseh, at Fort Dearborn, and then by Black Hawk, ended. The treaties were signed, and the Potawatomi gave up their homelands and moved. This is a drawing by Joseph Campbell, and there's an account of this Potawatomi removal in 1837. So the sketch is by Joseph Campbell, but this narrative is by Sid Vale in Moments. It was late afternoon on a summer's day. Those on horseback started into the river first, followed by braves and squaws on foot. Many of the ponies had lodge poles fastened to their sides, the ends of which dragged on the ground, and platforms were constructed on these, whereupon the younger children rode. Last in this procession came an aged, blind squaw. With her left hand, she clutched the blanket of an Indian girl who strode before her. Her hair, long and unkempt, was blown hither and yon by the winds, and her right arm was extended as though fearful of some unseen object that barred the way. The purple dusk fell upon her streaming hair, and the tattered blanket that floated on the surface of the stream about her was for the moment transformed into a vestment of royal hue. But there was an abject terror and helplessness depicted in the uplifted bronze face of her who toiled alone, waist deep in the stream, a purple wraith in the wake of the savage pageant. Sid Vale, Moments. So they're crossing the Kankakee River in the Moments area, leaving their Tearaki behind. Now, the equivalent of these amounts, you have to multiply by 16. The rates back in the early 1800s Multiply these prices by 16 and you get our prices today. You can see the routes of removal. This is the one that went through Moments. They would go to Iowa, western Iowa, northwestern Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Wachiki died in Oklahoma in 1873. This is the removal known as the Trail of Death from September to November 1838. Over 860 Potawatomi Indian people were rounded up and marched at gunpoint from their Indiana homeland. Many walked the 660-mile distance, which took 2 months. More than 40 died, mostly children, of typhoid fever and the stress of the forced removal. You can see where it went. Danville, Springfield, Quincy, all the way through Missouri to Kansas. So you notice a lot of Potawatomi populations in all of these areas out west or in the Midwest. Chief Shawanassi died in 1834 and did not suffer the removal because of that. He did not want to be buried in the ground, and so he was interred above ground in a log cabin, and he was facing west, the side of the sunset, with his rifle, tomahawk, pipes, and tobacco. This is one of the possibilities of what happened to his remains. There's a marker above Rock Creek near Camp Shawanassi that has the wrong date on it. His death was 1834. As you see, Mark Wacott there, standing with the monument. This is from Bert Burroughs' book, these illustrations. So we're going out towards the Kankakee River State Park from Bourbonnais. We're going along Route 102, where it says State Road. So when he was alive back in the, he died in the 1930s, Bert Burroughs did. This wasn't complete yet. So this is the State Route 102. Here's Rock Creek. Here's the Kankakee River. You can see the Rock Village of Chief Shawanassi and Little Rock Village. All of this area, now part of the state park, and Camp Shawanassi was divided up into sections and reservations. This is a blow up, shows Davis Creek and the Kankakee River. Petite Canada, I'm going to talk more about that, or Noel LeVasseur will do that. It means Little Canada, right to the northwest of Davis Creek in the Kankakee River State Park today. A little bit about Billy Caldwell. He continued to do what he could to assist the Potawatomi, and he died in Council Bluffs, Iowa in 1841. More on him at the end. If he was one of the persons that, if he was the person that traveled with you, you'll learn about his fate at the end of this program. And also Alexander Robinson, also another mixed blood, and he is, his monument is in the Chicago area where he died. Chabonnais, Chabona. We'll learn more about his fate at the end as well. And some say that Chabona and his tribesmen and women came back and forth to the Kankakee River Valley until 1854, when they finally left. Here you see on this little marker that Francis Cooper Wirtz is sitting on in 1933, the last campground of the Potawatomi, 1858. So the last date of their presence is debatable. And you can see the Potawatomi have now spread out through the country. And there's different bands of them. Here's another photograph of a reenactor at Ilalakash, and some of the other items at Ilalakash. Now, I'm going to pause for a second. We're almost to our intermission. And why don't we go ahead and answer this question? You don't have to give the answer out loud, but please now think about what question you would like to ask Noel LeVasseur in a few minutes. You're going to meet him at his trading post in Bourbonnais Grove. The year is 1837. Now, there's been a few things that have been presented to you already in John Hassett's narrative, this first part, that might have given you some positive or negative insights into this outsider, Noel LeVasseur. Maybe he's no longer an outsider. Maybe he's an insider in your mind as a Potawatomi. So what have you thought about him in positive and negative terms, and what question will you have for him when you visit him in a few minutes? The continuing debate. How did Noel LeVasseur relate to the Potawatomi? Was he a friend and protector, or an opportunist and exploiter? Now, let's say we've got our intermission. It's about 10:15, so let's take a 10-minute intermission at this time until 10:25, all right? And that's when we'll visit with Noel LeVasseur. He'll talk to you. He'll still show some slides. Don't ask me how he can do that, but he's very able to do it. And then the slideshow will end, and you'll visit with him at his trading post. Okay, intermission begins. All right, Deb. Lia longtemps que je t'aime et jamais je n'ai t'oublié. À la claire fontaine men allant promener, j'ai trouvé l'eau si belle que je me suis baigné. Lui a longtemps que je t'aime et jamais je n'ai t'oublié. Sous les feuilles d'une chêne, je me suis fait sécher. Sur la plus haute branche, les rossignols chantaient. Lui a longtemps que je t'aime et jamais je n'ai t'oublié. Chantez, rossignols, chantez, toi qui allais courger. Tu allais courir à rire, moi j'allais à pleurer. Lui a longtemps que je t'aime, je l'ai oublié. J'ai perdu mon ami sans avoir mérité pour un bouquet de roses que je lui refusé. Lui a longtemps que je t'aime, jamais je n'ai t'oublié. Bozo Nikan, Niga Nagi, Bozo Nikan, Niga Nagi Nigi. Bonjour, mon ami. Comment allez-vous, mon ami? Must I speak in my third language? I know Potawatomi. I have spoken Bozo Nikan, Nigani, Nigi. Hello, my friend. How are you today, my friend? Bonjour, mon ami. Comment allez-vous? Je suis Noel LeVasseur, les Français, Canadiens et Québécois. Ainsi, je suis le citizen de Bourbonnais en Illinois. Vous comprenez? Perhaps I will speak to you in a language that we all understand, although I do not know if you do understand the language of Anglais. It is my third language. We will speak in that language. We will understand each other, may we? I was born on Christmas Eve in the year 1799, and so my father Antoine and mother Marie Angelique named me Noel, and I had 5 brothers and sisters. I was born in the village, a farming village of Saint Michel de Masca, halfway between Quebec and Montreal. And so it was a poor farming village. You see, Quebec province, at that time, part of Great Britain, and the city of Quebec along the heights, and looking down from the heights towards the St. Lawrence River. In the time period right before I was born, Quebec province included all of this area, which of course encompasses this northwest of America around the Great Lakes. And so it was very familiar to me when I was born, this region, and not only around Quebec and Montreal, but also Mackinac and Detroit and Kaskaskia. We knew about this. The people of this region were all Quebecois during those 4 years, 1774 to 1778. When I was 17 years old in the year 1816, I went to work for the British Northwest Fur Company. And I was recruited in that year, but I went to work for their post, not up here near Grand Marais. And this is what that post looked like with its fortifications. But I went to work at the Mackinac on the island there. And so I was working there, and it was around this time that we built I went there in 1816. And over that winter, we built a fortress, and I was able to eventually set out in 1817. And I went along the waterways and the rivers, and you heard me singing "À la Clairefontaine," which was the song of the voyageurs, the Coeur de Bois. It was the unofficial anthem, national anthem of the French Canadians. Well, we would have to keep rhythm and keep pace and not to bore ourselves, so we would sing songs like this. Well, I took off with an Indian companion, and we went across the lakes. I went across this great lake of Michigan, and I came into the Green Bay area, and I took the waterways down to an area of Fond du Lac, and I traveled around here, the waterways, and I explored. And I decided in the next year, 1818, to go to work for the American Fur Company. And you see the pelts that we were able to trade for. And look at the canoe, how nice it is that we used. And look at the birch bark that is all rolled up. Now, we would take several months to build a canoe. We would have to unroll the birch bark, put it in position, put it around the wooden slats, and then seal the joints so that the canoe would not sink with pitch. And the pitch was made out of three substances. It was made out of spruce gum and charcoal that was, of course, heated up. And into that combination, bear grease was put. And so there we were with our canoes and its pitch lining that was impervious to water penetration. And we would sail the streams, the creeks, the rivers, the Great Lakes of the region. I met in 1821 Gordon Hubbard, another employee of the American Fur Company, at a post along Bureau Creek near the Illinois River, where we had a trading post. And he and I decided to set out and travel the Illinois River, and we went upstream into the Teatiki River, and we rode and we rode and we rode, and we went down this other river, the Iroquois River, to a site right here, where in 1821, we established a trading post, one of the few trading posts south of Mackinac. Oh my, what an interesting and informative year it was. Our trading post at Buncombe, just south of the Iroquois River. And here you see another portage area that we would use from the Great Lake to the Des Plaines River and go down. And so the Des Plaines River along the Isla Lacache would flow and confluence with the Teakiki. And I do not know, this technology has a mind of its own sometimes. I am impressed with it, but to a point. Anyway, the confluence goes into the Illinois River, and here you see the Fox River coming in. You can see here how the Teakiki, the Kankakee River, goes towards the portage, 5-mile portage area to the St. Joe River on up to Lake Michigan. I do not understand this aerial view. I am not a bird. I do not understand this. But perhaps other people in some later day would understand what all this means. An aerial view of the Des Plaines River and the Illinois, it's coming to me, and Michigan Canal. And it's flowing, and it's flowing. And there's a wooded area, the McKinley Woods. Oh, and it is an eating place. I do not know this place, but perhaps you do somehow. And then at this point, the Kankakee River comes in, and this is a confluence. Oh my, I love this view. I did not have it during my lifetime, but I love it. And so then it would begin the Illinois River. Ah, comprende? And so I met some individuals while I was fur trading at Buncombe. I eventually went back to and traded periodically at the Bureau Creek Trading Post. And I met there Antoine Bourbonnais. Antoine Bourbonnais, who also worked for the American Fur Company. And it was about 10 years later that he introduced me to his brother, Francois Bourbonnais Sr. And his son, Francois Bourbonnais Sr., and his other son, Washington, and his wife, Katish, and his other son, Anthony, and Peter, and his daughter, Mary Josette, and Catherine. And did you know that Francois Bourbonnais Jr. had a daughter by the name of Malteno, that another village in the future would be named after in this area. I see here also my friend and neighbor, Thomas Durham, who is plowing his field, the first time breaking open the prairie with his plow in the year 1835. My friend for life, Gurdon Hubbard, who outlived me by several years. I have this premonition of the future, but I do not want to talk about that now. We will talk up until the year 1837. The early Kankakee River Valley pioneers and settlers. And so I was married. During this time period that we are talking, up until 1837, to two beautiful women. I was married first to Miss Akekwa, and then I was married to Wachiki. Now, we did not have photography in my time, the 1830s, and so these are some estimations of their appearance, but take it from me, take my word, they were beautiful. And I was married to Miss Akekwa from 1829 until 1834, when she traveled with the Potawatomi back across the Mississippi River, and our relationship ended. And by that time, I had already been married to Wachiki, and our relationship, our marriage began in 1834 and ended in 1837 when she also traveled across the Mississippi. Periodically, we'd see each other when she would come back to visit. This is our trading post at Buncombe, just south of the current village of Iroquois, south of the Iroquois River. You see the Iroquois River going through Watsika, going north, going to the area of Roma Park, going up towards Kankakee, and Bourbonnais. Now, the Bourbonnais Grove took its name from Francois Bourbonnais Sr., when he came to live in the area in 1832 or so. And Bourbonnais Grove was a reference to a 6 or 7 mile grove of trees that went from the settlement up to the village of Chief Shawanasi, the rock village. Now, by 1822, Gurdon Hubbard, you see the word Hubbard Trail here. By 1822, Gurdon Hubbard, we were already here in 1821, had established another trading post in Danville. So he was going back and forth between Danville and Buncombe and Momence and Chicago on this Hubbard Trail periodically. He was called by the Chief Tamman Swift Walker because he was such a swift walker. I had 2 children by Miss Akekwa, Marianne and George William, and I had 3 children by Wachiki, Elihu, Olivi, and Archange. In the settlement of Bourbonnais Grove, you can see where my trading post is located. In your future time, it is coming to me now, it is the Olivet Nazarene University Larson Fine Arts Center. Oh, what an appropriate transition from my trading post to this Fine Arts Center. And you see the home that I built is actually off spot. It would be right over here, but it's nearby my trading post and St. Leo's Chapel, which later became Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church. The first Mass, by the way, was said in my home when it was built in 1837. The priest from Vincennes came to say the Mass. Here you see a site of a log schoolhouse that was built in 1837. And down here is my friend and neighbor's home, Thomas Durham. He and his wife, Margaret, lived there. All right, this is the home, a log cabin of Francois Bourbonnais Sr. and Katish and their children. And they probably had built this cabin by the year 1832. Later, on the foundation of this cabin, when they left to live further south, on the foundation of this cabin would be a structure built that would later become known as the Letourneau home, and the residents, George and Elodie Letourneau, and their many, many children. You can see the arrows that denote the important sites. This is what my home looked like that was located here, just a little bit to the west. You can see also my trading post. This arrow points to Bourbonnais Creek that flows west of Thomas Durham's home down into the Kankakee River to the site of where the Indian caves are located. When Watchakee was in Iowa in 1832, as the Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe was taking place and reservations were being distributed, my wife, Miss Akekwa, was able to, as she was the daughter of Shibone and Mosepka, they were able to, as princesses, to receive large reservations. And you can see how large her reservation was, taking in later on settlements of Kankakee, Roma Park, and so on. And this sketch by artist and author Vic Johnson shows the area again with the settlements and the reservations. Shawanasi's Reservation A, Meshakitino's Reservation H. These were the areas of their villages, and so appropriately their reservation would be there. Meshakitino. I had an interesting relationship with Chief Meshakitino. I was introduced to him in 1834 when Henri Boucher and Dominic Bray came to build my trading post in Bourbonnais Grove. Chief Meshakitino said to me one day when we were visiting, I had a dream. I said, oh, yes. He said, yes, in the dream, you gave me your black horse. I said, oh, huh. Well, then, of course, out of friendship, I gave him my black horse. I decided I would have to have a dream myself. And so I saw him a few days later, and I said, oh, dear Chief Meshakitino, I had a dream. He said, oh? I said, yes, this beautiful land where the sugar bushes are and the grove of trees from Bourbonnais Grove settlement to the river. You, in my dream, you gave it to me. All these sugar trees and all these groves of trees. So he said, oh, we are friends and I will give you this. I will honor your dream. But, LeVasseur, let us dream no more. Petite Canada. I would recruit in 1837 when I went back to Saint Michel, Iamask, many French Canadians, and I would say, there is bountiful land and full of riches. Come to Bourbonnais, come to Bourbonnais Grove. And they would, and they settled in the area of Petite Canada, although some of them did move into the village itself. But this was another settlement because there were so many rich farm areas around Petite Canada. Thomas Durham built my brick home, the first brick home in the area in 1837. He was quite a brick mason. In addition to his farming and his family and his Quaker belief and his abolitionist outlook, he was quite a man, and he built this beautiful mansion for me. And I decided things were so changing now. The fur trade was ending. The land opportunities were here. What should I do? It was an opportunity to make a fortune. So I had this house built and I traveled to San Miguel, Yamaska, outside of Quebec, my home village. and no one recognized me. I had been gone for 20 years. How could they not recognize me? Even my own mother, Marie Angelique, who was still alive, my father Antoine was dead, she did not recognize me. So I showed her my hand. And on my hand, she saw that I was missing the finger that I lost in a childhood accident. And she said, "You are my Noel." I was able to recruit many French Canadians to the area, and they came after 1837 in large numbers. I understand that you have had to make a decision. You have made an answer to your question. What is your answer? Do not tell me now, but you have made your answer. Assure me that you have made your answer. It is a difficult time in which we live. I empathize with you as Potawatomi. Some of you have a travel companion. What happened to this person who traveled with you on this journey? If you pick number one, Chabonnet, Chief Shabona, did support Tecumseh in the Battle of Tippecanoe and the Battle of the Thames during the War of 1812. He returned to Illinois in defeat. He tried to calm Black Hawk in 1832 in order to protect the remaining Potawatomi, and he warned white settlers against impending attack. He lived in Potawatomi lands across the Mississippi, but returned to Illinois and lived many summers near Davis Creek from 1849 till 1854. He died near Morris in 1859 and is buried in Evergreen Cemetery. Perhaps he was your travel companion, or perhaps it was Wachiki. She did assimilate with white culture. She married Gurdon Hubbard before me. She was married to him for 1824 until 1827. She married me and Francois Bergeron. She traveled 4 times back and forth across the Mississippi River, mostly by foot, to Illinois. She visited me twice in 1840 and 1863, and I provided education and other needs for my 3 Métis children, Elihu, Olivier, and Archange. She died in Oklahoma in 1873. Or perhaps Maine Polk was your traveling companion. He was born in 1765 and led the war parties many times in the late 1700s, and he killed settlers and livestock, went on the warpath against the Osage and the white settlers, recruited the Sacs, Kickapoo, Ottawa, and Chippewa to support the British in the War of 1812. He moved to a new village along the Yellow River in northwest Indiana and led raids against Fort Harrison outside of Terre Haute. Maine Polk refused to attend all peace councils. He died in 1816. Was Miss Akekwa your traveling companion? She assimilated with white culture too by becoming my first wife. She was a daughter of Shabona and Mosaka. She was given a reservation, as we saw earlier, that became the city of Kankakee by that Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe. She and I ended our relationship in 1835, and she moved west of the Mississippi River. She was still alive in the 1830s when Auguste Wiley, 1837, visited her and paid her $1,600 for 2 of her sections of her reservation. Was Billy Caldwell Shaganash your companion? If so, he was born to a Mohawk mother and Irish father, fought with the Tecumseh at the Battle of the Thames, and returned to Illinois in defeat. He became a trader and negotiator of treaties in Chicago and Peoria as a Potawatomi chief. He led the Potawatomi to Council Bluffs, Iowa, became a justice of the peace and judge in Peoria. He died of cholera in 1841 in Iowa. Alexander Robinson was also associated with the Potawatomi, the Chippewa, the Ottawa, and in the War of 1812 fought with the Tecumseh at the Battle of the Thames, and like the others returned to Illinois in defeat, although Tecumseh was killed. During the Fort Dearborn massacre, he came to the aid of John Kinsey and Captain and Mrs. Held. He was a staunch supporter of both the Potawatomi and the white settlers. He befriended both and died in Chicago in 1872. Katish may have been your traveling companion. She assimilated with white culture by marrying Francois Bourbonnais Sr. And after the Black Hawk War, the Bourbonnais family moved into a log cabin and settlement that would later become named after Francois and his brother Antoine Bourbonnais, Bourbonnais Grove. As a result of the Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe, Katish received a large reservation that later became downtown Kankakee. The Bourbonnais Sr. family moved south to the north bank of the Kankakee River that we talked about earlier. And during the summer of 1836, they moved to western Missouri during that Potawatomi removal. If Meshicatino was your traveling companion, he rose to prominence as the chief of the Potawatomi during the removal period. His village encompassed almost all of Bourbonnais Grove from the area where the church would be established, St. Leo's Chapel and Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church, all the way through Briar Cliff area to the Kankakee River. He was probably a leader of his band of Potawatomi during the removal of 1830. I knew Chief Taman in the area of the Buncombe Trading Post and the village nearby. It was his niece, Miss Akekwa and Wachiki, that I married. He knew Gordon Hubbard earlier, gave him the nickname Swiftwalker. He wanted his oldest daughter to marry Gordon Hubbard, but he declined and, as you know, married Wachiki. Chief Taman led one of the first groups of Potawatomi from the area in 1834. Or was Shamanasi the traveler with you? We know where his villages were located. Rock Village and Little Rock Village. It was at the site there that an Indian council, the Great Council, was convened in 1830. Shamanasi advised his people to make treaties with the white settlers in order to maintain their friendship. He was granted land reservation by the Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe. And even though his people were forced to leave the area, he died, fortunately. There is some strange noise. Perhaps it is a church bell calling us to prayer. I do not know. And he was fortunate in that he did not have to remove west of the Mississippi because he died in 1834. I wonder now how your traveling companion, you have insights. How did she or he react to the Indian removal acts of 1830s? You know their answer. How does that answer compare with your own? There are many local authors that have contributed to our history of the Potawatomi, the French colonial and the French Canadian history. A few of them you see here. This bibliography page and works cited page is full of their works and others. And now you are coming to my trading post. You can see what Vic Johnson's sketch seemed to convey its appearance. You can see also what it would take to purchase certain items that we've seen before, and also a page from my ledger book. Since I was illiterate, and most of the Potawatomi that I knew were illiterate, we still understood each other. They knew what they had on credit, what I was owed, or what they could buy from the notations in my book, as you Potawatomi know full well. Welcome to my trading post. What pelt did you bring today? Due to storage issues, I can only accept one pelt from each of you today. Please pick a number from 1 to 13. That number will identify the pelt you brought with you today. I will visit with each of you after asking about this certain pelt. Do you have your pelt in mind? 1 through 13, you have your number? Maybe? Which of these pelts did you bring? Ah. Now you know which pelt you have brought with you today. At this time, I am going to end this sharing of those pictures, and you can unmute your buttons. Do not ask me how this works, but apparently it does. And I welcome you to my trading post. Let me find my paperwork. Always so much work to do. Bozonikan. Bozonikian. Nigana, Nigi. I have always thought that my Potawatomi was good enough to be understood. Comprenez parler français?
Si.
Un peu.
Très bien, très bien. We will speak in anglais, which somehow we understand.
Merci.
Très bien, très bien. I need to ask which of you has brought the bear pelt today? I'm always looking for the bear pelt.
I have it.
Oh, and what is your name, dear Potawatomi lady?
Sunflower.
Welcome to the trading post today, dear Sunflower. Did you have a question for me?
I was just wondering how you feel about women coming in to do the trading as opposed to the men.
Women usually do the gardening work. That's not customary. It would be very advanced for the Potawatomi to allow you to come, but I am very flexible. My goodness, how could I be here without being flexible? Look at what I've gone through in my life. I've gone from a small farming community in Quebec province, moved to the Great Lake regions, lived on my own. I was a survivor, built a fort, traveled the canoes down the streams, traded for whatever hoped I was in friendly lands and not unfriendly. And then I found my way into this trading business, and now there is other land opportunities. I think that might be more fruitful as the trade for the pelts is declining. How are you doing, by the way, dear Sunflower?
I'm doing okay, thank you.
What was your decision? about the removal?
I was going to assimilate number 4.
How are you going to do that?
Well, I'm going to learn new skills, learn the language, learn your new technology.
You will have no rights in this state of Illinois.
It will be very slow go.
No rights.
Well,
You're a brave woman, Sunflower.
yes, and Katish is my friend, so.
But she's gone now.
Oh, she's gone? Oh, well, she taught me everything she knew.
She is in Missouri now, at the reservation across the Mississippi River.
Mhm.
Thank you for your question, dear Sunflower. I will come back to you with your bear pelt. I need to know, did anyone bring the wolf pelt today?
Me, Betty.
Oh, and what is your name, dear wolf pelt bearer?
My name is Sasha.
Sasha. Pleased to meet you, dear Sasha. And did you have a question for me?
Question. Well, I wanted to. We're talking about the current time, not the time. The question about all the years we covered. I hope. I am full-blooded Cajun. The French Acadians came through Canada, and I've been very interested. I wonder how the Acadians who might have came down through Illinois, how they entered into all of this.
Well,
And maybe it was too early. Maybe they weren't coming that early.
oh my, I'm sorry to hear about your Cajun ancestry because they were so, there was genocide committed against your people by the British and the French and Indian War,
Mhm.
the Great War for Empire. They were starving to death up in Nova Scotia, that
Mhm.
area, and they were forcibly removed,
Mhm.
as you know, from your ancestors.
Mhm.
And many of them made their way down to Louisiana and survived. I am so sorry. I wish that you could have come to Bourbonnais Grove. We would have taken care of you. But you made your way there because of the way the British took you. You had no choice.
Right, right.
And so I'm so sorry, Sasha. Did you, and so if you were in our region, how would you address the Indian removal acts of the 1830s? Would you comply? Would you resist?
I would have probably done it in a way of the number 3 answer, because I will always fight back first, and then after a while, when you figure out what the rules of the game of is, you try to comply as much as you can, but you're still in the back of your mind, you're still pushing, you're still pressing against what's going on.
Merci, dear Sasha. So your wolf pelt, that is very valuable as well. I come back to you a bit later. May we?
Okay.
Très bien. And did somebody bring a beaver pelt today? No one brought a beaver pelt. Oh my, I really need the beaver pelt. How about a muskrat pelt? No muskrats? Oh my. Did anyone bring a fox pelt? No fox pelt. What did you all bring? Mice pelts? Did you bring an otter pelt?
I did,
Ah,
I did.
and dear woman, what is your name?
Running Creek.
Oh, Running Creek, dear lady. I hope you continue to flow so well. And what did you have as a question for me?
A question. Shaughnessy was my companion, and I was happy to see that he managed to stay in the area.
Death does provide privileges, may we?
I'm sorry.
Death does provide some privileges.
Oh gosh, I hope so. I don't have a question for you right now.
How did you address the removal? Did you remove obediently or did you resist?
No, I resisted, but I decided to not go all the way to my demise so quickly. I decided to leave, but only so I could come back and fight again.
So that was number 3 as Sasha, the
Yeah.
same answer.
But
And,
I wanted to come back.
yes, and Sunflower picked number 4, I believe. May we? The assimilation number.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to assimilate it right away. I just wanted to come and fight back.
You would like to keep your options open.
Right.
And it was allowable to come back by the treaties. You could come back to your hunting and fishing grounds and enjoy the area, but it was a long walk.
Well, that was a problem. No doubt about that. A real problem.
Merci. Thank you very much, Magnifique. Merci beaucoup.
De
Did
nada.
anyone bring me a skunk pelt today? No skunk pelt. Oh my. I suppose you don't want to hunt the skunk anymore, but it's such a beautiful pelt. How about a deer pelt? Did somebody bring me a deer pelt? No. A possum pelt. No. A raccoon pelt.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Raccoon.
there is.
Two of them.
2 of you. Oh, très bien, très bien. I will take one of you, whoever wants to speak first.
Oh, I'll speak.
May we, dear lady, and what is your name?
Maize.
M-A-I-Z-E?
Yes, maize.
Très bien. And dear lady Mays, what question did you have for me?
I really didn't have. What did your children end up doing? What trades did they go into?
Uh, my children, my sons in particular, moved to Galena. Do you know Galena, Illinois?
I do.
And we're in business there.
Okay.
And I supported them, and I supported them in their education, as well as the daughters. Mary Ann lived here for many years until she died in 1850. My other daughters lived with us for a while, and they lived on their own and in the reservations west of the Mississippi. But my sons did business in Galena, Illinois. Thank you for your question, dear Lady Mays. And how did you answer the removal issue, the life-changing decision?
I'm going back and forth between 2 and 4. I'm not sure about assimilation. I think I would have liked to have moved away, but been able to come back to my hunting and fishing grounds. I think that's the way I would have probably decided.
Thank you, dear Lady Mays. So your raccoon pelt, I will come back to that. And also the other Potawatomi lady has a question for me. And what is your name, dear raccoon pelt bearer?
Well, that would be me, Francois. Even
Oh,
though
I thought it was someone else. I am so sorry.
it
Monsieur.
said Jean, but it's Francois. I went with crippled hand that I would resist as long as I could. The assimilating into the white culture and try and preserve what I could.
And are you on the run right now, Monsieur Francois?
Yeah, it's more self-quarantine than run at this point. So,
And Francois, what is your question for me?
Your dealings with Gordon Hubbard, Swiftwalker. How did he interact with the Potawatomi?
We were one with them, their cultures and I, just to think about it, Monsieur Francois, as a Potawatomi, Your life is very interesting, but to want to be here and to be with you and to live with you and among you and to marry a wife from your tribe, this says a lot about an individual, does it not, monsieur?
Uh, I see them more as opportunists, not necessarily as accommodating. Their first and foremost interest is out of the fur trade, and do what you can to get along with the locals. But at the end of the day, it's how many pelts can you ship back.
Monsieur, we are all a mixed bag of pelts, are we not?
We
Are you not an opportunist yourself, Potawatomi Francois?
perhaps not as aggressive as those early traders might have been.
What is your motive for your resistance?
It's protecting the territory that we call home, from encroachment, and recognizing that as the settlers come in, it could very well be an end to the life as we know it, and so trying to preserve that.
Monsieur, I've studied this for a long time. There's no hope for your survival here because of the winds of change. What are you teaching your children?
It's respect what you have and do what you can to preserve it as long as you can. There's always going to be challenges, but at the end of the day, it's trying to preserve our way of life.
Mhm.
But it seems that you're preaching death.
Perhaps, but with dignity.
We have to agree to disagree on these matters. I try to be a good man. I try to do what I can. I suppose opportunity does present itself periodically in life, as it has for me. But I feel like I have loved my wives. I have loved the people that they came from. I speak Potawatomi. How many of the other French Canadians are going to speak Potawatomi?
True.
Merci, Monsieur Francois. I will consider your raccoon pelt in a few moments. Was there someone else that had a raccoon pelt? I thought there was a Lady Potawatomi. And your name, dear Lady Potawatomi?
Sunrise Lake.
Oh, Sunrise Lake. Merci. And how did you answer the question about the removal? How are you going to make this life-changing decision? What are you going to do?
I selected number 5. I'm going to resist as well.
Oh, do you know Monsieur Francois and his family?
We must.
And did you have a question for me?
I did. I am very curious as to the trading post at Buncombe. My family grew up along the Iroquois at Buncombe, and we still call it Buncombe to this day.
I've seen people spell Buncombe several different ways. Have you?
Yes.
B-U-N-K-U-M, B-U-N-K-O-M-B. It's Buncombe. And either way, it was a very nice trading post. One of the few, as I mentioned earlier, south of Mackinac Island. Not many trading posts in this region. And so what is your question actually?
Exactly. What did you do to help the locals at your trading post there?
Until 1834, when the Potawatomi, led by Chief Tammon, left. One of the first tribes to leave was from that area south of the Iroquois River. So Buncombe was a thriving post until 1834, and that's why we moved, my associates Henri Boucher and Dominic Bray moved our trading post up to Bourbonnais Grove. And so that area was very productive until 1834. With that Treaty of Camp Tippecanoe in 1832, after the Black Hawk War, everything was changing, and the winds of change. We have to go with the way the winds push us, do we not?
Correct.
But you're not.
Yes, I'm loyal to my people and to my home.
But you will possibly die.
But it's my family and what we have worked so hard for.
I accept your answer. As with Monsieur Francois, we was part on agreeing to disagree. Merci, dear Sunrise Lake. Has anyone brought me a bison pelt today? No. Has anyone brought me a coyote pelt? No. A bobcat pelt? No. There's nothing left. What did you bring? Monsieur, with your teepees in the background, what did you bring?
I brought a wolf pelt.
Oh, but only Sasha brought the wolf pelt.
Well, you missed me. You missed me.
How did I miss you? You're right there.
It's okay. No problem.
And what is your name, dear sir?
Running water.
Oh,
Almost like running creek,
yeah.
but running water.
Merci, running water. And did you have a question for me?
Yes, I had a question about the Potawatomi, the way they travel from Green Bay to Detroit. Why didn't they keep on going south to the state where it would be warmer instead of going north to Detroit?
Monsieur, do you move into your neighbor's backyard?
No.
There were other Indian tribes in the area south, and so without conflict, the Potawatomi had certain open areas that were not in dispute.
But
From Detroit all the way around Lake Michigan to the west of the Illinois boundary.
what tribe was south of us?
The Kickapoo and the Mascoutin. We must deal with those people. You cannot just say they are nothing.
Yeah, but it's warmer down there. It's nice and warm down there.
Monsieur,
Instead of going to
more
Green
to
Bay to
life.
Detroit.
Dear running water, sir, there's more to life than warmth. This is a very nice climate here, and look at the growing season, how long it is. And the winters are so beautiful. How can you dispute this, monsieur? And how did you answer the question about the removal? What life-changing decision did you make?
I chose number three. I like it here, but I don't like the white people. And because of that, I'll go where there's no trouble. But I'll stay if they didn't come.
Merci. Merci. I understand your answer completely, monsieur.
So I'll go to Missouri.
And you and I, we get along very well, may we?
Yes, we do.
Très bien, très bien. Now I must speak to this gentleman with something on his head, his ears there. He has not said anything. What pelt did you bring, monsieur?
Running deer had a raccoon, and you had a lot of raccoon.
I do have a lot of raccoon. And what is your name, monsieur?
Running deer.
Oh, you're running deer. I get a little confused with all the running. Water, running creek, running deer. And what is your question, monsieur?
What were the furs used for in Europe?
Oh, they were used for hats to keep off the rain and the water. They were used for coats. They were used for especially outer garments to keep out the bad, harsh European weather in the winter.
And why did that change?
It changed because the pelts ran out in this area. The hunting of the bison ended here in 1820. Monsieur, if there's no commodity to trade, there's a problem with the supply and demand. We are lucky that we still have these pelts today. I have a large storehouse full, so full, I can hardly fit in anymore right now. We are so fortunate right now. You have brought me so many pelts over the last few months. We are in good shape. How did you, Monsieur, answer the question about removing your life-changing decision? What are you going to do?
I will move west, number one.
And why?
I always respect authority, and the treaty is an authority.
And you're given land in the West.
It was a reasonable deal if it had been followed properly.
And you will not have to fight. You will just receive this land.
That's right.
It is given to you as a reservation. May we? Perhaps it will be as good as, if not better than, this land, the Kankakee River Valley. May we?
I may be tricked, though. I sometimes trusting authority gets me in trouble. The authorities don't always keep their word.
Merci, monsieur, merci. And I have I gone through all the pelts? Has everyone had a chance? Everyone has had a chance to ask their questions, may we? And now I will give you something. You have brought your pelts. You can have, by picking a number again, anything in my storehouse that number represents. It could be jewelry, it could be blankets, it could be kettles, it could be rifles. I will not tell you what the number represents right now, but pick a number and I will freely give you this item and you can keep your pelt. My storehouse is full. Merci, may we?
Merci.
Très bien, très bien.
Gracias.
Now Noel LeVasseur is gone, and I think we have, what, 5 minutes left? Did you have any questions for me, Jim Paul?
No, this is a very good presentation. It's very
Oh,
good.
Thank you, thank you. I enjoyed putting it together. It was a lot of work, but I wanted to have a good model for the next episodes. And with John's work, I had to integrate it into mine, so it was a little challenging in that sense. So you had a good workout this morning. We've learned a lot, and now it's going to be out there for others to enjoy. I hope it continues to be a success.
I have a question, Dr. Paul. So my grandparents did grow up along the Iroquois River, right outside of Iroquois. My parents live not far from there. We were always told that bunkum came from the cattle drives and they were bunking them down before they crossed the river there at Iroquois. Is that true? Urban legend?
I don't know. There were no settlers there in the Potawatomi, and if the Iroquois were there, they didn't really have cattle drives. They may have crossed the river with some cattle. They couldn't really domesticate the bison. We're talking about 1821 for the establishment of bunkum as a trading post. Not sure about that legend and tradition, Deb. Maybe, but maybe not. I think bunkum has to deal with, it could be a slang word, or it could refer to a lot of commodities.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't offer more on that. Any other questions? Go ahead, Elaine.
You said you recorded this. Can we rewatch it somehow?
Yes, we're going to try to put it on the Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society website. I don't think that We're going to try to work that out in the near future. Did everybody get a chance? Helen, did you get a chance to ask all your questions? Oh, she's on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
There.
There, now I can hear you.
Okay.
Did you
Well,
get a
no,
chance to
I
trade
had
your
a bear.
pelt?
I was just like Linda.
Did you
So
get a chance to trade your pelt?
I had a bear pelt. My question for you would have been, what would you have done differently?
Good one.
Wow. I would say show more support to Mishakekwa and Wachiki and the children. And I think at the time, maybe Noel LeVasseur did do that as much as possible, but maybe not. That might be one of his regrets. And so you had the bear pelt?
I did. I came on with Linda and then I just.
Oh, so, and how did you answer the removal question?
Or I would assimilate. I'm not a
Oh,
fighter.
try to anyway.
I
That's
don't like to
great.
walk long
Well,
distances.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Did everybody get a chance? Mary, are you okay? All right. I think we're done.
Thank you.
I bid you now. Oh, you're so welcome. So welcome. Au revoir. Have a great day.
What do we get for
See,
our
au revoir.
pelts? What do we get for our pelts?
You get anything you want. You picked a number. You go to my storeroom. I've got all kinds of jewelry, trinkets, blankets. I've got guns in there, pots and pans. You get what you want.
Okay,
All on our way. House
One
then.
thing though, just one item.
one item.
Don't be a looter.
Decisions.
Au revoir. Enjoy.
So I go.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Wayne. Bye, Elaine, Betty, Helen.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, Deb, Mary, Judy.